rights 1 and 2, process 1433, process 1 and 2, process special process 1 and 3. Yeah. Stand.
Members, the Housing Committee on the Maori Television Service, the Aratuku Whakata Irarangi Amendment Bill. The question is that parts 1 and 2, and that's debate on clauses 4 to 33, and clauses 1 to 3 stand part. I call Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been much made in the discussion on this bill about the contribution of Maori television to the broadcasting environment in New Zealand and its role over the last 10 years as its position as a taonga in our broadcasting environment. And I would welcome during the course of this debate for the Minister to get up and tell us what he believes has been that contribution and what is his vision for Maori television going forward, and where he sees this bill as fitting in part of that going forward vision, in particular with relationship to the use of the spectrum, which is really fundamentally why we're passing this bill under urgency, is to get that spectrum, because that spectrum has to be converted. The law has to change by the beginning of December in order for that spectrum to be converted, and that's why we're rushing through these last parts of this bill right now in order for that to happen. But in context, there has to be the context, and that context is that the Maori television service, like Radio New Zealand, like New Zealand On Air, like every publicly funded entity that receives funding for broadcasting, has had its funding frozen for years now. 4 years, I think this is probably, we're heading into the 5th year of no extra funding, and yet we're passing a bill today which transfers the spectrum, the analogue spectrum, into a digital environment, which is a necessary factor. We're heading into a 10th anniversary for Maori television, and there's no talk at all about what the development of Maori television is going to be, and whether that includes a vision for high definition, in which case there will be a need for more spectrum, because, Mr. Chair, just for your edification, in order for the high definition channel to be developed, it requires a lot more spectrum than is the current amount of spectrum used for analogue television. And this is actually at the heart, this issue, how that spectrum will be managed, who will manage it, and what decisions will be made about it, and in whose interests they'll be made, are really the big questions that lie behind this bill. And I think the Minister, during the course of the second reading, will have received and hopefully taken note of those specific questions, and will get up to his feet and provide us with some explanation and discussion around that. Because in its, and this, I'd like to refer back, Mr. Chair, to the briefing to the incoming Minister of Maori Affairs and Finance. That's the Minister and the Chair, Peter Sharples, but also the Shareholding Minister, Bill English, who have been referred to on a number of occasions as ducking for cover on the appointment of the new Chief Executive at Maori Television. They had a briefing from Maori Television in 2011, and that briefing referred specifically to the management rights and spectrum allocation and the impending change to digital, and that raised in a very polite manner, but it still raised questions about how that spectrum was going to be managed and who was going to manage it, and it harked back to what had happened in 2010, I think it was, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but 2010, when there was a a lessening of the amount of analogue spectrum for Maori television, which happened really under the noses of everybody without much public comment, but that there was a reduction in the amount of spectrum where Maori television had no say. It was a reduction from 32 megahertz down to 16. And there were concerns raised. There have subsequently been concerns raised about how in the future that may happen again. And if that did happen again, what role and what rights would Maori television have to ensure that that didn't happen and that they had some say in that? Mr. Chair.
Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other issue, the absolute critical issue, is around the funding for Maori television and how it can manage its future in this environment, which includes in which funding has been frozen. And we all know that the effect of funding freezes over a number of years actually equates to funding cuts. Because the service cannot continue to operate at the same level, but I think we must put on the record that both Maori television and Radio New Zealand, in that environment of frozen funding, have both done exceedingly well in providing the service that they do to the New Zealand public in our straightened public broadcasting environment. But if we are to look at going into the modern digital environment where there are multiple platforms, where there is the possibility of high definition television, as we should be considering, and we should be having that debate around that, what ability will Maori television have to do that? Because what rights will they have over the ability to do that through their spectrum, and how will they do it if their cost structures and sources of income are not, if there's no ability for that to be increased, reviewed, and for them to actually take control of their own future? Given, Mr. Chair, that this is the 10th anniversary of Maori television in New Zealand, I would like to get some indication from you, for the Minister and the Chair, as to the Minister here today, as to what his belief is, what his vision is, what his ideas are around how Maori television can take us into its second decade in New Zealand and perform that important role as a taonga in New Zealand. I'd also just like to reiterate my concerns, Mr. Chair, around the management of the spectrum under the Te Putahi Pāho structure and that governance structure in the context that, as the Minister himself said in his second reading speech, is in a state of flux, and where there are question marks around its composition of the groups that make it up and its ability to perform those governance functions effectively to the standard that we need to have as at the Electoral College, that relationship between the Crown and the Electoral College. So I would like to hear more from the Minister on that. I think that lies, there is a question mark, and it's in the commentary to the bill, that question mark. And it seems very ironic that we're passing a piece of legislation, which we have to pass by the beginning of December to transfer that spectrum over, where there's a huge question mark in the bill over the governance process of that and of the management of that spectrum. And I think that's, as I said in my second reading speech, that the government really should have had its house in order in terms of that issue, and it really only came up in the Select Committee under questioning from members of the committee on both sides. But it really only did emerge in the Select Committee, because it certainly wasn't in the officials' advice to the Select Committee, and it really only did emerge during the discussions. Why was it that it only came up then, and what is the government, what is the Minister doing about it to ensure that we can be reassured that Maori television can progress can move into the modern era with the spectrum that has been transferred over, can move into an era of high definition, will have the amount of spectrum it needs to do that, and will have some control over the way that its spectrum is managed, and more importantly, will have its funding reviewed and hopefully increased.
I call Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know at home people listening to this debate at the committee stages